She's unstable. This woman doesn't know what she's doing. That's what they said. On camera, in court, with the whole town watching. But what if that woman, barely holding on, barely believed, had something no one expected: a rusted key, a forgotten cabin, in a secret buried deep beneath the soil, one that could destroy the powerful and rebuild everything they tried to erase? Before we dive in, let me know, what time are you listening to this and where are you? Drop a comment below. We'd love to hear from you. The rag on her hand had long stopped absorbing anything, but Calla kept wiping the same patch of laminate anyway. The counter's edge was chipped, worn down by years of elbows, keys, and cheap purses. Behind her, someone shouted an order: 2 over easies, no toast, but the sound barely registered. Her phone buzzed in the apron pocket. Without looking, she pulled it out, bracing herself. 38 over 14s. That was all she had left. 3 jobs and still not enough to stay afloat. Bartending shifts were being cut, tutoring clients had dropped off one by one, and the diner had started rotating staff on weekends. She stared at the number as if it might correct itself. It didn't. Across the room, the radio sputtered through a sports recap before slipping into local news. Property auction this Friday in Flathead County. One of the lots, an abandoned cabin near Pine Hollow Ridge, is listed at the minimum bid of 50 cents. Yes, you heard right. 50 cents. The land's been dormant since 1977 and was recently cleared of all legal liens. Her head tilted slightly. At the bar, a customer unfolded his newspaper. A photo caught her eye, first grainy black and white, a rust-bitten cabin nearly swallowed by pines. When he left, she reached across the counter, tore out the page, folded it into quarters, and slipped it into her pocket behind the order pad. At noon, she clocked out, walked 3 blocks, and boarded the northbound bus without a word. Her limbs ached from standing all night, but it was the kind of ache she knew well. Persistent, familiar, never urgent. The apartment was small enough that Jude's voice carried from the other room as soon as she turned the key. I was looking at those self-sustaining cabins online, he said, eyes fixed on his laptop. If it's got a deep well and some sun, we could rig solar panels. Think that place has a well? Calla dropped her bag near the heater, crouched beside it, and stayed quiet. Jude kept scrolling. Some people build underground greenhouses. I found this video. This guy grew spinach in December. He was 12, but sounded like he'd lived twice as long. She rose, unfolded the wrinkled newspaper, and scanned the auction listing. Friday, 10 a.m., 1 office, 1 address. The bus jolted to a stop. Calla stepped down the wind, pressing against her coat as she faced the weathered sign of the Department of Natural Resources. Her fingers tightened around a small envelope. Inside were 2 quarters bound with a red rubber band. She pushed through the glass doors. The county office in Flathead didn't look like the kind of place where futures were decided. It smelled of disinfectant and old paper air that clung like dust to forgotten buildings. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. A battered American flag sagged in one corner. The room was full agents in neat jackets, a man with a Bluetooth headset pacing by the coffee machine, a couple in matching Patagonia fleeces whispering over a topographic map. No one had come for small stakes. Calla stood at the back near a rack of water-stained brochures on forest management and timber rights. Her coat was too light for the weather, and nobody noticed her. At the counter, a clerk called her name as though reciting a grocery list. Calla Brandt. She stepped forward. The envelope felt flimsy in her hand, barely heavy enough to matter. The clerk opened the flap, blinked at the contents, and held up 2 coins. This is 50 cents. That's the listed opening bid, Calla replied, her voice even. The woman glanced at her monitor, then at the man behind her. Parcel 47B, he leaned over her shoulder, squinting. Harlan Vexley's place. A beat of silence followed. The room shifted, chairs scraped. Someone coughed too loudly and a mutter drifted from the window. Oh, that place. A sharp laugh cut through from the middle row. She thinks that shack's a golden ticket. The clerk hesitated. It says no bids have been placed since 2018. That qualifies. Ownership can be transferred under the 5-year abandonment clause, Section 8. Her colleague added under his breath, title cleared under recent adjustments to the Quiet Title Act. No active claims. Owner presumed deceased. Do I need to bid higher? Calla asked. No. If no one else makes an offer before close of business today, it's yours. Cash received. Sign here. The pen squeaked as she wrote her name. Her handwriting looked small on the transfer form. Another voice rose from the crowd, older and rough around the edges. You know no one's made it more than a season out there, right? She didn't turn toward him. A clerk handed over a brown envelope. It held a single brass key dulled with age, tagged 40 from B, Ridge Hollow in faded blue ink. No fanfare. Just that. The sunlight felt too bright. Calla stepped into it like someone surfacing from underwater. Her boots struck the pavement with quiet purpose, though her heartbeat lagged behind. She kept walking until the building vanished over her shoulder. By dusk, she had climbed the rusted stairs to the roof of their apartment complex. Only 4 stories high, but from up there, Helena looked smaller, easier to leave. A folder lay open on a cracked plastic chair. She held the deed up to the light. 1 page, 2 signatures, 72 acres, and a name she had never heard until that day. Harlan Vexley, born 1942. No next of kin, no public record after 1994. She turned the page. No photographs, no notes, just 1 scribbled line from a past assessor. Well on site, no power connection. Cabin needs full rehab. Jude appeared in the doorway, blanket around his shoulders. I watched 3 videos about building solar batteries, he said. I think I could wire one if I had the parts. She didn't ask how long he had been watching. He came closer, eyes flicking over the folder. Do you think the well still works? We'll find out. He gave a small nod and drifted back inside. The next morning, she rose before dawn and moved by habit coffee water bags. 2 changes of clothes each. Jude's schoolwork binder, her old camp stove, flashlight, rope, a first aid kit untouched since he was in kindergarten. She left the apartment key on the table without a note. There wasn't much left to explain. The car coughed before starting the engine, wheezing like something stubborn and elderly. In the mirror, no traffic, no landlord waiting with questions. As the tires rolled down the empty street, the city shrank in the side mirror. Mist thinned the morning behind her. At a red light, a gust caught the edge of the newspaper, still on the dashboard. The listing fluttered, folded itself in midair, and slipped out through the cracked window. Calla didn't reach for it. She kept driving north, the road narrowing as trees closed around her. Gravel popped beneath the tires as the car lurched through the final curve. The forest pressed tighter the higher they climbed, branches tangled like pulled threads. At the end of the path, the cabin revealed itself hunched low, leaning slightly as if caught mid-flinch. She killed the engine. Silence rushed in. The door opened slowly. Cold air met her first, then the smell, damp timber. Rust and a sharp trace of mold buried deep in the bones of the place. Jude jumped down behind her boots, sinking in the thick mat of pine needles. The porch groaned under their weight. Hinges did the same when she pushed the door. The cabin held less than expected. Dust hung in weak sunlight. A wood stove crouched in the corner cabinets, sagged, and floorboards felt soft in places, the kind of softness that warned of rot. A dead fly floated in a mug near the sink. Jude dropped his bag and glanced around. No outlets, he said, unsurprised. You think the well still works? The pump stood behind the cabin, cast iron bolted to stone. She cranked the handle, once nothing. Again. On the 3rd try, water coughed out, dark at first, then clear. Cold, metallic, but flowing. That night, they pitched a tent under the cabin's roof. It was warmer that way, safer too, with wind threading through broken panes. Jude read by flashlight. Calla fed pine logs into the stove, watching smoke rise through the vent she had sealed with duct tape and hope. Behind the pantry door, wedged among old pots, she discovered a cupboard nailed shut. A few firm pulls gave way. A metal cash box weighted bolted to the frame. She pried it open with the crowbar. Hinges shrieked before giving in. A stack of notebooks lay within their pages, yellowed handwriting cramped and angular. Beneath them rested a folded map marked with dozens of X's. A glass vial rolled against the side, filled with silver dust, thick and dull. By morning, Jude was buried in algebra. She set a plate of canned beans and bread beside him, then walked the mile down to the trailhead where cell service returned. A ride share carried her into town. Flathead's library sat between a shuttered pharmacy and a barber shop whose sign hadn't been updated since the Reagan years. The walls smelled faintly of old magazines and lemon polish. She asked about Harlan Vexley. The librarian, a thin man with long arms and nicotine fingers, tapped a few keys. No death certificate. No tax return after 95. A couple newspaper mentions in the 80s something about a land claim dispute. Called him a reclusive geologist with a flair for conspiracy. Sounds charming. She showed him the notebooks. His eyes widened. You should talk to Delaney Pryor, he said. Used to work land disputes out here. Keeps to herself, but sharp. Delaney's office sat above a coffee shop that sold more incense than coffee. The stairs creaked under Calla's weight. A bell jingled when she pushed the door open. Delaney glanced up from a crossword puzzle. Late 40s boots on her desk-graying hair pulled into a messy twist. Her blazer didn't match her jeans, and she clearly didn't care. You're not from around here. Calla shook her head. Cabin up on Ridge Hollow. Found some things. Delaney flipped through the notebooks without much interest until she stopped on a folded page marked in red. Her brow furrowed. This isn't just field notes, she murmured. These are core samples. Dates, percentages, annotations, and code. She drew the map closer and traced a finger across one of the X's. Do you know what this is? I thought they were just sketches, Calla admitted. At the bottom corner of the sheet, a faint circular stamp caught Delaney's eye. She pulled a magnifying glass from her drawer, tilted the page, and let the letters sharpen into view. Argus Mineral Consortium. Her head lifted sharply. Where exactly, her voice tight, did you find this? Calla stayed silent. Spreading the notebooks across the desk, Delaney studied the cramped shorthand with the precision of years spent in courtrooms. Margin notes, test results, figures that barely resembled English filled the pages. This isn't hobbyist scribbling, she said, slipping on her glasses. These are assays, metal content estimates. Look here. Harlan recorded 32% silver yield from a surface vein. That's extraordinary. Calla stood at the edge of the room, arms folded, as if to shield herself from what lay on the desk. Her throat was dry like dust she couldn't swallow down. I didn't come here for this, she whispered. I just wanted somewhere quiet, somewhere safe. Delaney tilted her head. You think people with safe lives end up with 72 acres in Flathead County for 50 cents? No reply. Calla's eyes drifted to the vial rolling between Delaney's fingers, the silver dust catching a glint of morning light. It felt unreal, both too heavy and too fragile. I'm not a miner or a lawyer or anyone ready to fight a multinational corporation. You don't have to be, Delaney said. But someone tried before you. Harlan didn't just log samples, he mapped disputed boundaries, flagged structural risks, even sketched old exploratory shafts. This wasn't a hobby. It was evidence. Evidence of what Calla almost asked aloud, but Delaney was already pointing to the faded seal on the page. Argus Mineral Consortium. Extraction giants. They've been circling the Northwest since the 70s, buying land wherever they could. Officially, they pulled out years ago, said it wasn't viable. But if Harlan uncovered something they wanted buried. Calla leaned back against the wall, pulse quickening. She didn't want this story. She had lived enough that ended in courts and losses in systems designed to strip people bare. Her hands burrowed into her coat pockets, fingers curling tight. I just want to raise my son in peace. Delaney's gaze lifted. Then maybe you should know what you're standing on. That night clouds pressed low and heavy, swallowing the trees in damp silence. The stove fire had burned to a dull glow. Calla lay beside Jude in the tent, listening to the cabin creak the timbers, shifting wind brushing the rafters. Then came a sharper sound, a metallic clink. She sat up waiting. It came again, faint but deliberate. Grabbing the flashlight, she slipped out. At first the room looked untouched. Then details shifted into focus. The cabinet door ajar, notebooks no longer stacked as they'd left them. The map had been unfolded, then reversed. Someone had gone through everything. Jude stepped out, eyes wide but steady. I heard it too, he said. I checked the floor. The sample's still there. I hid it under the tarp when you were outside earlier. She turned on him quickly. Why would you do that? I don't know. I just thought someone might come. Her chest tightened. On the stove lay a folded note, edges still warm. She opened it with both hands. It's best not to stir up the past. The words knocked her into the nearest chair. By morning, Delaney arrived without warning, hair half brushed, coffee thermos in hand, boots kicking snow from the step. She didn't wait for permission before entering. There's a truck parked just past mile marker 8. No tags. Hasn't moved in hours. Calla showed her the note. Delaney studied it, expression flat. "They're watching," she said. Calla rubbed her eyes. "I don't know what to do. You don't have to decide today. But if Argus is circling, it means they know something's buried here. Either Harlan left more behind, or he scared them off." Crouching by the stove, Calla refolded the map. Her hand paused at a small red circle cramped writing beneath it. Delaney leaned closer. "Temporary extraction ban. Unstable soil." "Why temporary?" Calla asked softly. "Why not permanent?" "That's what we need to find out." She sank back on her heels, breath unsteady, hands trembling from something deeper than cold. "I'm not ready for this," she whispered. Delaney didn't argue. She simply set the map flat again, finger pressing on the red mark zone. "You want to know what he died trying to keep hidden?" The next morning, Calla carried the folded map in her bag, the decision heavy against her chest. At the land office, the paper trembled slightly as she slid it across the counter. The woman behind the glass gave it a half-curious glance, flipping through the application packet. "You're applying for a preliminary mineral exploration permit." Calla swallowed the tight knot in her throat and nodded. "Just a sample dig. No machinery. No impact beyond testing." The clerk raised a brow but stamped it anyway. "We'll process this. Response within 10 business days." It took 3. Delaney's call came clipped and urgent. "You've got a legal complaint from Argus. They're claiming breach of proprietary rights under a joint ownership clause." Calla blinked. "What clause?" "That's the point. It wasn't filed with your title, probably buried in Harlan's estate papers, but they've dug it up." The hearing was set for Monday. Calla hardly slept. Jude read quietly while she paced fingers, brushing the folded map as if it might offer comfort. That morning, the administrative chamber buzzed with stale coffee and low voices. Calla sat beside Delaney, trying not to wring the edge of her coat. Across the aisle, 3 men in sleek gray suits filled the front row. In the center sat Clay Vexley. He looked nothing like the photo she had seen years younger than Harlan. Neat hair, athletic frame, perfect teeth. He wore his presence like an expensive watch, silent yet insistent. When the clerk called the case, Clay rose first. "I'm here on behalf of Argus Resource Group," he said smoothly, "and as the legal heir of Harlan Vexley, my late brother." Calla froze. Delaney leaned closer. "This wasn't in any of the filings. They've kept his name off everything until now." Clay's tone turned almost apologetic. "We believe Ms. Brandt may have acted in good faith, but she's occupying property with contested mineral rights. Our concern is for her safety, frankly. Unstable land, unresolved boundaries, potential liability." Then his eyes found hers. "You're stepping into something dangerous. I'd advise reconsidering." The room blurred at the edges. The clerk asked something. Delaney responded with statutes and inheritance codes. Calla only saw Clay's hands-folded smile practice the same expression she remembered from caseworkers and debt collectors, always paired with lines like, "We understand this is difficult, and let's find a solution that works for everyone." When the hearing closed, the ruling was swift but temporary, the property placed under provisional freeze until inheritance could be clarified. No development, no access, no alterations. They left the courthouse with nothing more than a photocopy of the injunction and a copy of Harlan's probate file, most of it sealed under Montana estate law. Back at the cabin, the silence felt sharper. Calla lit the stove, letting its warmth spread. Jude sat at the table, flipping through a survival manual, as if it mattered more than the court. After a while, Jude looked up. "If they take the cabin, are we leaving?" She didn't answer. He studied her carefully, as if gauging how much truth he could bear. "I don't mind the cold. I just want to know if we're staying. That's all." She crouched by the crate they used for files, digging past folded maps until her hand brushed a sheet she hadn't examined closely before. Faded handwriting ran across the page, one line darker than the rest. "I won't let my brother destroy this land." HV, her pulse slammed so hard it shook her breath. The stove snapped a log in half. Wind pressed against the eaves. Jude stayed quiet. She folded the paper with care, thumb smoothing the crease. Her eyes clung to the ink, missing the moment when the stove flame guttered, then surged. An engine rumbled faintly up the road. Delaney's tires ground over ice-packed gravel, her car swerving before stopping hard. She left it running door flung open, climbing the porch steps, with urgency stitched into every move. "You're not going to believe this," she said, cheeks flushed, hair wild from the wind. Calla stood in the doorway, hands damp from dishes, sweatshirt sleeves bunched at her elbows. She stepped aside, letting the sharp air sweep in with Delaney. "It's a video," Delaney announced, dropping her bag on a chair, "filed under a fake name in the town archive. One of the librarians found it misfiled and called me the handwriting matched something I'd asked about." From her coat, she drew a worn VHS tape. Edge's frayed label, yellowed and barely legible. Calla stared. A video of who Delaney set it on the table like evidence. Harlan, from the year before he disappeared. The TV VHS combo salvaged from the shed buzzed faintly before flickering on. Static shifted into the grainy image of a dim room. A bare light bulb swung overhead. Then Harlan's face appeared, his hair longer than in the photos, eyes tired yet sharp, voice low and deliberate. "If you're watching this," he began, "then I've either vanished or been erased." His hand tapped a pile of folders. "They said I was unstable. The courts claimed I'd lost touch with reality, but I wasn't the one altering land records after midnight." Calla leaned forward without realizing it. "I found silver. Not industrial quantities, but veins rich enough to attract attention. I logged everything, filed notices, even told Clayton." That's when it shifted. The tape crackled. Harlan rubbed his face, then looked straight into the lens. "My brother filed a guardianship petition without ever confronting me. I didn't even know until I was already in the facility. Paperwork stamped temporary hold for mental instability. Medical notes by a man I never met. I became legally incompetent in a week." Delaney drew in a sharp breath. "I got out eventually, but by then the land was gone. My rights were gone. My name didn't even appear on half the records." The footage faltered, dimmed, then went black. They sat in silence, the buzz of the space heater filling the gap. At last, Delaney spoke, voice quieter than usual. "This is damning. If it's authenticated, it's proof of fraud, abuse of power, and manipulation of guardianship law." Calla swallowed. "So if we take this forward, you'll be going after a corporation," Delaney replied, "and a legal heir with serious resources. Argus will bury you in filings, smear you on local stations, paint you as unstable. Single mom homeschooling off-grid, they'll twist all of it." Calla rose and crossed to the window. Snow drifted again, light and silent, collecting on the porch railing like ash. She curled her fingers into her sleeves. She had thought the worst part would be the freeze on the land, the feeling of being shut out from a place that felt like home. But this made her smaller than she'd felt since her divorce, like the ground could be stripped from beneath her, with signatures she'd never even see. Jude lay on his stomach near the stove sketching. Across the page stretched a bold drawing of the cabin. He was adding something to the roof, a streak of yellow cutting upward. She crouched beside him. "What's that?" He grinned. "A sunbeam. You said light always finds a way in." Her throat tightened. Back at the table, the tin box waited. She slid her thumb along its edge and lifted the lid. The contents lay as she'd kept them: rock samples, property printouts, court forms, and now the VHS tape. Delaney said nothing. Calla closed the box firmly, set it down and turned. "We're not walking away." The next morning, snow began to loosen its grip, the creek spilling past stones that had been buried all winter. Calla crouched beside Jude, both of them bent over a map spread across a salvage board. Harlan's sketches overlaid an old USGS sheet, faint arrows pointing toward clusters, marked only with cryptic symbols. Jude traced one path with his finger. "You think this line means a vein could be?" she said, tilting the board toward the light. "Especially if it's the same elevation as the quartz seam we saw yesterday." They had spent the morning testing soil, pH strips, conductivity jars labeled with dates. Harlan's cramped notes, once scattered, began to align with their results. Not just silver proof that someone had tried to bury it. "I want to mark this one." Jude pulled a red flag from his pocket. "It's the third spot where the readings jump." Calla smiled without meaning to. "You're getting good at this." He beamed and planted the flag at the edge of the dry stream bed. Back at the cabin, they sorted samples into jars. Sunlight streamed through the patched east window. For once, the place felt still. That afternoon, Delaney drove her into the valley. The meeting was at a diner booth with Tilda Rain, a freelance reporter, whose squint made her look perpetually suspicious. She waved Calla into the seat and ordered black coffee. "I've been tracking Argus for years," Tilda said. "You're not the first single landholder they've steamrolled." She spread copies of deeds across the table. Clay Vexley's name shows up right before every transfer. Same play, discredit the owner, freeze the property, then move it on a technicality. 3 counties, same pattern. Calla's fingers curled under the table, and no one stopped them. People tried, Tilda said flatly. Didn't get far. Delaney leaned in. We have video, samples, a pattern. Tilda's eyes narrowed. Good. You'll need more than sympathy. That evening, Calla rolled up the map and pinned it over the workbench. Jude unpacked his workbook, already asking about erosion patterns. They tested soil, scribbled formulas, folded laundry in between. For a while, it almost felt ordinary. Later, they dragged their sleeping bags outside. The clouds had cleared, stars sharp against the dark. A fire cracked low. Jude lay back on his jacket arms behind his head. You think Harlan ever did this? I don't know, Calla whispered. I hope someone did it with him. He rolled onto her shoulder, a voice soft. I like it here, even if the world forgets us. She didn't answer. Her gaze lingered on the cabin roof, her smoke ribboning upward. A breeze stirred. Far below, headlights flickered between trees. A pickup idled at the bottom of the trail engine, rumbling before it disappeared behind the ridge. No one heard the latch slip. The front door creaked open. A shadow moved across the floorboards, deliberate and quiet. The map on the wall fluttered. A pale-gloved hand peeled off one red marker, then another. The door eased shut. Silence returned. Hours later, headlights swept across the windows as Calla came home. The front door stood ajar, creaking with the wind. Her breath caught as she stepped in. The map was gone. The samples too. The VHS tape missing. She rushed to the bedroom. Jude, no reply. The storage nook door had been shut tight. She yanked it open. Jude sat on the floor, knees pulled in flashlight, trembling in his grip. They locked me in, he whispered. Told me not to yell. Calla pulled him close, her hands shaking. Did they hurt you? He shook his head, voice flat. They wore gloves. One had a flashlight with a red lens. She held him until his breathing steadied. Then she reached for the phone and called the sheriff. 2 deputies arrived an hour later. One took notes with disinterest, the other thumbed through Calla's remaining belongings like he was checking a grocery list. No forced entry. You sure you locked the door? The taller one asked. I'm sure, she said through clenched teeth. Well, no real damage. Doesn't look like much to report. Maybe just kids messing around. They took evidence. Her voice rose. They took everything. The deputies glanced at each other. The taller one scribbled something and handed her a copy of the report. File a follow-up if you find anything missing of value. Delaney showed up just as they were leaving. Her jaw was set tight, lips pale. She waited until the squad car disappeared down the gravel road. They're not just covering for Argus, she muttered. They are Argus. That night, Delaney arranged for Jude to stay with an old friend. Someone out of town, someone clean. I'll keep checking in, she promised. But he can't be here right now. Calla nodded, numb. She hugged her son goodbye in the driveway, crouched to his level. Be good. I'll call every night. Jude's small fingers brushed her face. Don't let them take it, Mom. Don't let them erase us. The cabin felt cavernous without him. She wandered through it like a stranger, tracing scratches on the table where they had done science lessons. His notebook still lay open, half a drawing of a molecule left unfinished. In the corner, one last sample jar remained tucked behind canned beans. She grabbed it and hurled it at the wall. Glass shattered. Silver dust scattered like something holy and broken. Her hands shook. She reached into the cupboard and pulled out a bottle Delaney had once brought for celebration someday. Still sealed. She twisted the cap, drank deep. Her throat burned. She drank again. And again. Minutes blurred into hours. She lay on the floor, cheek pressed against the cold boards, staring up at the rafters. The creak of the wind sounded like footsteps. She reached for her phone, dropped it. Silence. The room tilted. She let it. Then came the knock. Soft, certain. At first she thought it imagined. Another trick of exhaustion. But it came again firmer. Dragging herself up, she cracked the door. An older man stood on the porch, wind-beaten, shoulders wide. Pine needles clung to his coat. In his hand, a yellowing envelope thick with age. I worked with Harlan, he said, not asking to come in. He told me someone would come one day looking for answers. Calla squinted. Who are you? Name's Alton Breyer. Harlan kept copies. Not everything, but enough. I think it's time someone saw the rest. He extended the envelope, fingers steady despite the cold. She took it. Behind him, the horizon softened, light bleeding into pine branches like an apology. Somewhere far off, a bird cried once, then again. She stepped aside, but Alton didn't enter. He just nodded and walked back to his truck boots, crunching frost, hardened ground. Calla shut the door, leaned against it, clutching the envelope. Her gaze shifted shattered glass on the floor, the half-erased drawing on the table, the sealed flap in her hands. She didn't open it yet. She needed to clean the floor. She needed to breathe first. But later, when night pressed close and the house was still, she broke the seal. The envelope was heavier than expected. A folded document, a small plastic case, mini DV, its label nearly faded, scrawled in shaky ink, final, HV. Calla turned it in her hands. Where did you get this? The man, different now features, rugged, time-carved, stepped fully into the light. I promised I'd keep it safe, he said. Name's Bennett Gray. I worked with Harlan in the early 80s, back when this land was more trees than trouble. Delaney arrived moments later, coat unzipped, hair whipped by wind. Her eyes locked on the mini DV. No one uses these anymore, she muttered. We'll need a digitizer. I know someone, Bennett said. She's got a lab in Kalispell. I can drive it over tonight. Then he handed Calla a second item, a folded page, edges, yellowed creases, softened by years of touch. She opened it carefully. A will, handwritten. Signed Harlan Vexley, fingerprint pressed beside the name, dated August 17, 1994. He'd been working on a model, Bennett explained. A conservation cooperative. Locals sharing profit from extraction, but only under strict environmental controls. He thought it could set a precedent nationwide. Calla lifted her eyes. So what happened, Clay? Happened, Bennett said flatly. There was a dispute. Quiet. No court, no press. Suddenly, Harlan was deemed unfit, committed for evaluation. Clay had him declared legally incapacitated before the ink dried. By the time Harlan got out, the paperwork was buried, and he was labeled a recluse. Delaney took the document, scanning its lines. This would upend everything if it holds. He knew that, Bennett said. That's why he made the tape. Just in case. They didn't sleep. Delaney's contact in Kalispell agreed to meet at dawn. By noon, the digital file arrived in Delaney's inbox. They huddled around her laptop. The image was grainy, washed at the edges, but Harlan's face was unmistakable. Tired, older, defiant. He sat in the cabin's main room. The same walls. The same stone fireplace. A clock ticked faintly in the background. If you're watching this, Harlan began, then Clay has either sold the land or tried to. He held up a paper, the same will Bennett had handed over, and read it aloud, slow and deliberate. At the end, he pressed his thumb into ink and stamped the page. The camera zoomed close. August 17th, year of our Lord, 1994. This is my full and final intent. Delaney froze the video. That's chain of custody, biometric confirmation, and dated media. If the courts don't accept this, they'll have to burn the statute book. Calla stared. Why didn't he release it? He was being watched, Bennett said. Clay's reach goes deeper than you think. Media, law enforcement, zoning boards. Every attempt Harlan made got blocked, so he waited, hoped someone else would finish it. Delaney grabbed her coat. We need to control timing. Argus is already defensive. Clay's scrambling with the press, claiming you hacked records and forged Harlan's journals. Calla blinked. What it's starting, Delaney said. He's planting doubt before the storm, which means the storm hits tomorrow. The generator hummed that evening as Calla sat alone in the study, lights low. Jude's drawings still covered the wall. One showed a sun rising behind a tree scrawled beneath it. We are stronger than shadows. She unrolled the geological map across the table. Red and blue lines stretched across the topography. Her eyes locked on the western slope, the shallow silver seam she and Jude had found. Her hand didn't hesitate. A red marker pressed bold strokes across the page. We don't react. We initiate. The ink bled slightly. She capped the pen, exhaled, and turned out the light. 3 days later, that decision carried her to the courthouse. Calla stood at the clerk's window, palms damp against the folder she'd carried for days. Inside were Delaney's drafts, motions, affidavits, Harlan's will, and a statement to reopen the case challenging Clay's inheritance. The clerk behind the glass flipped through the papers without comment, stamped the top sheet. Filed. As Calla stepped from the federal courthouse in Missoula, wind swept along the stone steps. Across the street a camera clicked, then another. By noon, Argus had countersued defamation disruption of corporate interest malicious libel. Damages sought $5 million. Delaney called it a scare tactic. They want to drown you in fees and time. Textbook. Her voice cracked over the line. The Bar Association just flagged me for ethics review. Someone accused me of weaponizing process for personal vendettas. Calla sat curled in the library's backroom carpet damp with mold. Jude's workbook lay open beside her pages, filled with mineral notes and water filtration sketches. His handwriting still curved as if learning to trust the pencil. News vans prowled near the cabin. Regional headlines rolled out by evening, single mom's silver conspiracy. Underground land war in Flathead. From waitress to warpath, who is Calla Brandt? She watched silently. Her photo flashed on one screen caught mid-blink. The voiceover claimed she was dodging questions. Back at the cabin, fresh paint screamed from the northern wall. Next time I won't miss. No signature. No doubt. She called Delaney, voice hollow. They came while I was gone. Do you want to pull out? Delaney asked. The line buzzed like a held breath. I don't know, Calla whispered. That night she walked to the stream alone. No flashlight, no plan. The water slapped her ankles icy and sharp. She crouched by the rock bed staring at the reflection. For a moment the face looking back seemed older. Someone else. Someone losing. Back at the cabin she scrubbed the graffiti with bleach and steel wool. The red faded but never vanished. She didn't light the fire. Didn't sleep. She sat with her coat still on arms, folded tight, rocking without noticing. At dawn she drove to the library's print lab. The room was empty except for a student asleep with earbuds in. She logged in. The transfer email had arrived. Subject final conversion complete. Attached was a high-resolution clip, time-stamped and authenticated. Harlan's voice came first, raspy, measured, but firm. If you're watching this, then someone's already lied about me. The video focused on his face. Gaunt, clear-eyed, he looked directly into the lens. They said I was unstable. They said I hallucinated hoarded maps, claimed treasure ghosts. But I was documenting. I was proving they didn't just want the minerals, they wanted to erase the land to get to them. He held up a sheet of paper with his signature and fingerprint beside a series of numbers, the GPS coordinates of the richest vein. His tone turned quiet. If Clay Vexley is using me to secure this claim, expose him. Do it without apology. Calla sat frozen for a moment. The printer behind her groaned to life. She didn't remember hitting print. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard. Then slowly she opened a new tab. Her cursor blinked against a blank social media post. For the first time in weeks she smiled. Not a triumphant smile, just the kind that knew exactly what was coming. By the time the hearing opened days later, her post had already ignited the room she was about to walk into. Clay's voice echoed across the courtroom microphones, smooth and disarming. I didn't want this to become a spectacle, he told the press, seated just behind the bar. I feel for Ms. Brandt, truly. But at some point we must ask ourselves, are we enabling someone who is clearly unwell? A few reporters scribbled down quotes. One woman raised her brow and leaned over to whisper into her colleague's ear. Calla kept her spine straight, jaw tight. The courtroom felt overlit, the air sterile with recycled heat. She stared ahead, not at Clay, not at the judge, just above the judge's shoulder, at the seal of Montana. Delaney nudged a manila folder forward. Calla stood, cleared her throat, and spoke into the microphone with a voice quieter than she had rehearsed. I'm submitting a report conducted last week by an independent geologist verified by the state board. The mineral concentrations on the property match historical charts kept by Harlan Vexley, previously dismissed as speculative. She handed the folder to the bailiff. Clay didn't look at it. He tapped the arm of his chair, waiting. The moment Calla sat down, he rose, buttoned his jacket, and adjusted his stance like an actor about to begin. It's not about silver. Not really. His tone darkened. It's about a woman who once sought medical attention for anxiety-related episodes and now claims to be the gatekeeper of a forgotten mine. She's not a villain. She's lost. Delaney shot up. Your Honor, The judge raised a hand. We'll allow the plaintiff to respond with documented evidence. Calla stayed silent. She didn't need to speak. Delaney set a USB drive on the bench. We're submitting a video statement recorded by Harlan Bexley. It contains his voice image fingerprint and explicit intention to preserve the mineral rights for public benefit. It also details the circumstances surrounding a questionable psychiatric commitment signed by his brother, Mr. Bexley. Clay's smile faltered, though he held steady. Deep fakes exist, Your Honor. We've already submitted forensic authentication. The judge exhaled. The court will review the video in chambers. The hearing is adjourned pending evidentiary examination. Outside, the press had multiplied. Camera flashes burst like popcorn. Clay disappeared into a black SUV with tinted windows. Calla stood on the courthouse steps, blinking against the late afternoon glare. Delaney handed her a paper cup of lukewarm coffee. You did fine. I didn't say a word, Calla murmured. Exactly. The drive back was silent until the last bend before the turnoff. From a hidden road, an unmarked box truck barreled into their lane. Delaney swerved, tires shrieking. At the last second, the truck veered away and vanished around a ravine before either caught the plates. They pulled over gravel, crackling under the tires. Calla's hand shook on the door handle. You okay? Delaney asked. She nodded, though her throat burned. Back at the cabin, the evening passed without conversation. Jude was already asleep, curled in a quilt by the hearth. Calla gathered everything: maps, printed emails, hand-labeled rock samples, court filings. She wrapped each item in plastic and packed them into a rusted tin box she had found under the stairs weeks earlier. 2 warped floorboards behind the stove came loose. She slid the box into the crawl space and pressed the boards back until they snapped flush. A creak from the porch froze her in place. No knock, just the wind nudging the doorframe. She waited. 10 seconds, 20. Silence. Then a flicker at the window, a figure standing beyond the tree line, still watching. She didn't step out. She didn't call. Instead, she pulled the curtain and doused the lamp, heart pounding like it was warning her from within. Behind her, the fire dimmed. Jude's redrawn map, annotated with water lines and soil types, still hung above the hearth. She left it there. She left everything. She sat in the dark, listening for footsteps. Morning brought no footsteps, just an envelope. It slipped from the pile of junk mail onto the floor. Delaney noticed it first, tore it open carefully, expecting another threat. The note was handwritten, short and clean. Be careful. Someone on your team may have already been bought. No signature. Just those words centered on the page like a single match in a dark room. She called Calla immediately. By the time they met at the cabin, Calla had already pulled up camera footage from the past 48 hours. The video loaded frame by frame, slow as syrup. Why's there a gap here? She murmured. Between 2:14 a.m. and 3:27 a.m., the log showed nothing. No static, no activity. A full blackout. Someone had erased that section, not locally, but from the cloud archive. Delaney leaned in. Only 4 people had login access. She named them one by one. The last name made Calla's mouth go dry. Beth, your legal assistant. She used to clerk for Argus's litigation firm, Delaney admitted. But she told me she left because of ethics issues. Did you verify that I didn't think I had to? Calla turned away, eyes hot. You didn't think you had to, her voice rose without warning. You brought her into my case and didn't think, after everything she's worked with me for years. Calla yanked her jacket off the chair, grabbed the file boxes from the table. I should have known. Nobody sticks through this unless they have something to gain. You don't mean that. I absolutely do. Her hands shook as she shoved papers into a duffel. You think this is about trust? This is about survival. I have a son. I don't get to make noble mistakes. Delaney reached for her arm, but Calla pulled back. I'm done, she said. I don't care what video we have or how clear the proof is. It doesn't matter if every fact is on our side, if everyone around me is leaking pieces of it. You're letting them win. I'm letting myself breathe. She stormed out. The screen door slammed behind her like punctuation. At the truck, she sat behind the wheel without turning the key. Her forehead dropped against it. For a while, she didn't move. Then her phone buzzed. A video call. Jude. The signal glitched once, then cleared. He was in a living room somewhere, Delaney's friend's house probably. Blankets stacked behind him. He looked smaller, as if the distance itself had pressed down on his shoulders. "Hey," he said softly. "Are you okay?" She tried to smile. "I'm fine." "No, you're not." She let out a sharp breath that broke into a laugh. "I'm not smart like you," Jude said. "I don't get geology or law stuff, but I do know when someone's trying to scare you off." She stayed quiet. "And I know you wouldn't let them," he added, leaning close to the camera. "Not unless you forgot what you told me." Her eyebrow lifted. "What did I tell you? That light always finds a way in. You said that even when it doesn't look like it, it's still trying." Her throat tightened. "I miss you," he said. "I miss you too." When the call ended, she didn't go back to the cabin right away. She stood near the tool shed, holding the phone loosely, dusk settling on her shoulders like a thin shawl. Crickets started. A branch cracked somewhere in the tree's, animal or man, she couldn't tell. Eventually she walked back. The main room felt altered, or maybe she was. Jude's map still hung by the hearth. She traced the familiar marks, Harlan's notes beneath Jude's additions, their pens nearly indistinguishable. Her gaze shifted left, past the well, the stream, the fire pit, and stopped on something she hadn't noticed. A small triangle, circled twice, labeled only with a single letter L. She grabbed Harlan's original copy. Same symbol, same place. Her stomach turned. The mark sat directly above the board Jude had once tapped, saying, "This one sounds weird." She'd assumed it was just old wood. She took the flashlight and pried it up with a crowbar. Dust lifted. Beneath a rusted metal latch, hid in the stone, almost invisible unless you knew where to look. Her fingers hovered, then pulled. The hatch groaned open, breathing out a stale gust of must and memory. She let it close again, waiting for Delaney to return. By dusk, they slipped along the back road behind the ridge. Delaney parked far down the hill, out of sight from the main road. Calla carried the crowbar, the flashlight, and a rolled tarp, every step careful, deliberate. The cabin stood still, bathed in the fading amber of evening. No truck tracks, no cigarette butts, no new spray paint. She checked the door frame for signs of tampering, nothing. Beneath the loose board in the kitchen, the hatch waited. This time she climbed down with purpose. The space below barely allowed her to stand upright. Metal sheets braced the earth walls. In one corner behind a crate, a rusted lockbox lay buried under burlap. Delaney crouched, eyeing the seal. "That's not recent." They opened it upstairs with an old hammer. The hinges creaked before surrendering. Envelopes bound in twine, a leather notebook, a folded contract. On top, a will, ink faded but legible. Harlan's signature. Witnesses. The final paragraph landed like a hammer blow. "Should I go missing under suspicious or coerced circumstances, my brother Clay Vexley shall have no claim to any portion of my estate or holdings, including but not limited to the Flathead property, mineral rights, or published research." Delaney let out a bitter breath. "This changes everything." Calla unfolded the contract. The logo of a preservation trust spanned the top. An agreement offering stewardship of the land under strict ecological protection, never disclosed. She stared for a moment, then stood. "We go public." They scanned everything, watermarked it. Delaney's contact at the Montana Ledger confirmed receipt. Calla sent emails to watchdog groups, independent journalists, a geoscience forum. Her thread online ended with one line: "He didn't disappear. He was erased." Shares surged. Thousands, then tens of thousands. Reddit, X. Podcasts clipped Harlan's voice. "There are things beneath the ground worth more than money if you know how to listen." By afternoon, a headline landed: "Whistleblowers Family Challenges Argus Over Montana Land Rights." Argus denied everything in 2 sentences. Clay appeared on local news, voice tight, gaze uncertain. "The Vexley family values environmental safety. We welcome full review." A federal subpoena reached Argus's regional office. The court reopened Harlan's estate. Calla watched shadows shift across the floorboards. A cool wind lifted the edge of Jude's map pinned to the wall. She stepped into the light. No speech, no script. Just turned on the camera. This is where a man once chose not to destroy what couldn't be replaced. She uploaded the clip without filters. The judge's ruling came midweek. Temporary custodial access was granted. Argus withdrew its lawsuit, citing constructive dialogue and reputation protection. Reporters shouted. Calla walked past them, hand gripping the satchel strap. Her jaw never moved. A letter arrived, scanned notes from Flathead locals, some once hostile, others silent. One simply read, "You reminded us that land remembers what people forget." A knock at the door. Bennett Gray handed her a folder of historical surveys. Hand-drawn lines, notes on erosion zones, soil types, shaded habitats. He always knew this place had value, Bennett said. Not just for what's under it, but for what it can still become. Jude stepped from Delaney's car with a backpack, a folded map, and a jacket bearing an embroidered pine. He didn't rush. Just looked around like he was seeing the place through new eyes. They shared hot cocoa by the camp stove. He unfolded a revised geological map. Topography remained, but the annotations had changed. This color, he said, tracing green ridges, means we keep it untouched. But here, pointing to a wider sweep by the creek bed, people could visit, study, build eco-shelters if we do it right. Calla followed one red circle with her fingertip. "You did this, I just made it clearer," he said. "Like you said, light always finds a way." He hesitated. "Did we win?" She turned one of Bennett's pages over. On the back, Harlan had sketched a wind-bent tree roots like anchor lines. "I think she said we made enough noise that someone had to start listening." Requests started coming in. A local teacher asking about field trips. A university researcher offering free environmental surveys. Calla didn't answer yet. She sat out front with a pencil and notebook, jotting names to thank, to avoid ideas, to test lines not to cross. Not a plan exactly. Not yet. Mist cleared early. The field glowed with dew-laced grass. Birds darted through firs and naked branches. A squirrel clicked from a stump, then vanished into brush. Calla hauled the warped warning sign to a log. The black paint had blistered into jagged shapes. "Danger. Keep out." She dropped it flat, picked up the hammer. One strike cracked it, the next split it. She kept swinging until nothing sharp remained. Nearby, Jude crouched low, pressing a new wooden placard into the soil. He stood, checked its angle, then gave a single nod. Simple white letters brushed by hand, "Land of Kept Promises." She didn't take the path. Boots sank into moss, weaving between trees. Her breath deepened with the climb. Behind her, the cabin faded into forest quiet. The hill hadn't appeared on any map, but Harlan had drawn it countless times, its ridge, the shadow stretching across the western bend rocks, curled like the earth's ribs. At the top, a lone tree leaned eastward, bark peeling like sunburned paper. Wind carried a scent of iron and pine. Ahead, old planks lay scattered where a survey platform once stood. She knelt by a stone ring, pulled the leather notebook from her coat, and held it for a moment before opening. Pages crackled. Soil charts, elevation lines, notes scrawled in slanted block print, a stained coffee or rust, the smell of paper and dried leaves. She reached the back cover. Written sideways, nearly hidden. "We don't keep the land because it's valuable. We keep it because we need something they can't take." It didn't land like a blow. Not anymore. She sat still for a long time, eyes fixed on the clearing, mind combing through the chaos of the past few months, the courtroom, the shouting, the threat painted in red across her wall. But her thoughts snagged on a quieter moment she'd almost buried. That hearing when Clay had tossed her medical records across the table like weapons, and she had chosen not to flinch. She hadn't replied, not out of shame, but out of clarity. Her silence wasn't surrender. It was choice. A breeze stirred, lifting a strand of hair from her face. She closed the notebook gently and set it beside her. There had been years-long stretches when she believed herself small, fragile, temporary. A woman defined only by proximity to responsibility. A mother, a worker, a problem to be solved. Some nights shame coiled so tightly in her chest it became a shape of its own, something living. Not today. She rose, brushing soil from her jeans. From here, the land opened wide valley folds rolling east toward the highway, a soft shimmer where morning light touched the streambed. Her phone buzzed. Jude's name lit the screen. "Hey, sweetie," wind carried through his voice. "Mom, for the cabin model, should the windows face the ridge or the creek? I want to get the light right." She laughed softly. "Which way does the sun come in best?" "The creek side, I think." "Then face it that way." A pause, then quieter. "It's going to look cool when it's done." She smiled, not at the model, but at how he'd said, "when, not if." "Yeah," she said. "It really is." After the call ended, she wandered to the edge of the old platform. A few broken boards still jutted from the soil. Among the debris, a flat gray rock caught her eye no larger than her hand. She knelt, picked it up, cold and solid. From her bag, she drew a small folding knife. The blade clicked open. With careful pressure, she carved. The stone chipped and resisted, but slowly the words took shape. Not a headline, not a battle cry, just two words cut by her own hand into something no one had claimed yet. Still standing. The town hall was packed tighter than she'd ever seen it. Rows of folding chairs filled every corner, people standing shoulder to shoulder along the walls. Murmurs buzzed beneath tired overhead lights. Calla sat near the back beside Delaney, who had traded her blazer for a denim jacket, creased sharp at the elbows. A bulletin board behind them still held a faded flyer for a lost dog from 3 summers ago. Nothing here had changed except everything had. The sheriff opened the meeting with one line. We're opening a formal investigation into the unlawful transfer of estate claims through fraudulent mental health documents starting with Clay Vexley. Silence dropped like a weight. Not outrage, not disbelief. Relief. Someone in the third row exhaled long and loud. A woman clutched her husband's hand. Calla spotted the city clerk nodding slowly, as though she'd always known something wasn't right, but hadn't had the words for it. The projector clicked on. Slide by slide, names and dates filled the wall. 4 land parcels. 4 former owners either missing or recorded as involuntarily institutionalized. The pattern was unmistakable, legal loopholes bent into nooses. Then came Argus's name. Not shouted, not dramatized. Just bold letters on a white slide. Argus Resource Group. Voluntary withdrawal from Flathead County projects. No press release. No apology, just retreat. The state audit had hit harder than expected. Millions in fines, lawsuits pending in 3 states. A reputation once ironclad, now rusting in headlines and subpoenas. Delaney didn't gloat. She only raised an eyebrow and whispered, "Told you they weren't untouchable," before crossing her legs. Later that week, her law license was formally reinstated. A national environmental legal network reached out with an offer, one she didn't accept right away. "Not done here yet," she said. Not until they put the last nail in Clay's coffin. That nail came the following Tuesday. The courts granted Calla full legal ownership of the cabin and surrounding land retroactive to the original 1978 deed. With it came a unique designation, protected land with cooperative mineral rights should she ever choose to partner with conservation mining agencies. She didn't respond immediately. She just tucked the letter into a drawer beneath a stack of old notebooks in Jude's first geology report titled, "Silver is Cool." The invitation to speak at the town hall came 2 days later. Calla almost declined. That afternoon, though, she walked alone down the gravel road into the heart of town, wearing the same scuffed boots from the day she bought the cabin for 50 cents. The same jacket, the same knot in her stomach, only now it wasn't fear. It was gravity. She took the stage quietly, adjusting the microphone without a word. All eyes lifted. She didn't talk about Clay or lawsuits or what the land might be worth. "Some places aren't valuable because of what they contain," she said. "They're valuable because of what they remind us to protect." Then she stepped back. Applause didn't erupt. It rose slowly like dawn. First a few claps, then more. No cheering, just the kind of sound that meant something had landed deeper than the room. As she turned to leave, she froze. A woman in her 70s stood near the aisle holding a small envelope. Her cardigan was too warm for spring, and her shoes orthopedic, but her eyes were sharp beneath it all. "I'm Edith Vexley," she said. "Harlan was my brother." Calla's chest tightened. Edith stepped forward and extended the envelope. "He used to write letters he never mailed. I found this after he disappeared. Thought it was meant for someone like you." Calla accepted it, uncertain of what to say. Folded gently within was a photograph. Harlan stood by the cabin, one boot propped on a rock, his left hand holding a battered notebook like a compass. He looked younger than in the video, eyes narrowed from sunlight, not suspicion. On the back, in faint cursive, someone had written, "The keeper of the land is never the strongest, just the one who doesn't quit." She didn't move for a while. The photo rested against her chest, her breath slowing. Beneath the noise of the room, a breeze pressed through the tall grass, curling in at the open window, like it had been listening all along. The old roof had been replaced with cedar shingles that still carried a faint resin scent when the sun struck right. Fresh paint warmed the once weather-worn boards, a soft clay gray, blending into the hillside as though the cabin had always meant to belong there. A new sign hung left of the doorway, carved by hand and sealed with beeswax finish. Letters imperfect but certain, Fieldhouse 50 cents. Jude crouched beside three Valley kids, palms dark with charcoal dust, elbows buried in cardboard panels. Beside them sat a solar oven prototype, angled precisely to catch the afternoon sun. Don't tape the sides too tight, he instructed, brow furrowed. You want just enough heat to cook s'mores, not melt the whole thing. One of the girls snorted. That happened to you, didn't it? He grinned guilty. Twice. Calla stood near the edge of the clearing, sorting laminated charts into a weathered crate labeled Outdoor Chemistry, Session 3. The backs of her hands had tanned, and a small burn on her forearm, courtesy of a campfire experiment gone sideways, had already faded to a story. Every week she wrote new lessons, not just about atoms or soil pH, but about reaction, observation. What happens when you stop waiting for permission and start testing what's possible? Behind the cabin, volunteers hammered the frame of a second structure. Nothing fancy, just a lean-to with recycled windows, shelves for seed trays, and room enough to sleep two visiting researchers or tired hikers. Someone had planted lavender by the walkway. Someone else had hung wind chimes from old spoons. The town didn't need convincing anymore. It had shown up, with tools, with questions, with kids and thermoses and odd-shaped donations. No one asked Calla why she stayed. They just asked where to help. Near the garden beds, a woman in her 60s knelt to clip dead stems. Her son had once worked for Argus. She didn't bring that up. Calla didn't ask. The only thing spoken that day was when she pointed at the tomato vines and said, "They'll need trellising soon." Near the porch, Delaney leaned on the railing, arms crossed, eyes half shut against the breeze. She'd taken the environmental justice job, mostly remote, but she still came by twice a month, to visit, to remind Calla what stubborn looked like in someone else. "You ever gonna put up a fence?" Delaney asked, watching one of the goats chew on Jude's hoodie sleeve. Calla shook her head. "Let 'em wander. They find their way back." She opened her inbox later that night, half expecting junk mail and maintenance bills. Instead, a subject line stood out: Proposal Federal Pilot Program, Community-Based Environmental Education. She read the body twice. A nonprofit coalition wanted to study her model. Maybe scale it. Maybe partner. Maybe nothing more than a few months of shared data and curiosity. But they'd seen the impact. They'd seen something worth keeping. She didn't reply yet. She didn't need to know the answer. The sun had begun to set, washing the field in gold and copper. Calla stepped out onto the porch, cradling a tin mug filled with warm tea. The scent of chamomile and cedar mingled with the dusty sweetness of the earth, still warm from a full day of light. Out near the well, the wild grass had come back thicker, richer. Yellow asters and soft purple clover tangled near the base, where the old stones curved in uneven circles. That had been the beginning, the spot where she'd first wondered if anything could grow out of something forgotten. She didn't try to freeze the moment, didn't take a picture. Instead, she let it pass through her like wind. Calla traced the words on the new wooden plaque just inside the door, freshly hung with rope from Jude's first camp kit. Where old promises are kept, where new ideas take root. Jude would be back in a minute. He always lingered near the goats a little longer than he was supposed to. There was still so much unknown, so many things she couldn't plan, for couldn't defend against, couldn't hold. She didn't know how long this place would last, didn't know what shape the dream might take next. But for the first time in a very long time, that didn't scare her anymore. What Calla discovered wasn't just silver, it was strength. This story isn't about winning a legal case. It's about reclaiming the space where your voice was once silenced, about planting something hope, truth, a future where others left only ruin. If you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or told to stay quiet, this one's for you. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more emotional stories just like this, real, raw, and unforgettable.